Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm really excited to see how the community comes together to create something new and powerful out of all the challenges we're facing today. We're able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our sponsors. Join me in thanking our 2020 Denver Startup Week sponsors, our title sponsors, Downtown Denver Partnership, JP Morgan Chase, Prologis, and Zero. Our track sponsors who have made all the great content you're hearing today possible: Battery 621 and the Public Works, Capital One Cafe, Colorado Lending Source, Friday Health, Quizlet, Exactly, Zayo, and Zestful. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement this week. Thank you to Wix, Kenzen, MAPR Agency, Obsidian HR, Kickstart Fund, Promontory Mortgage, Molson Coors, and Comcast. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our virtual Denver Startup Week, and don't forget to use hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experience and moments of inspiration on social media.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Denver Startup Week, Day 3. My name is Ryan Margolis. I'm one of the co-chairs of the product track for Denver Startup Week. I'm also a member of the organizing committee. I'm moderating the panel today, and I'll be tuned in just like everybody else on Zoom because my day job is as a startup founder for Denver-based Notion. So to all of our panelists, I believe I can speak for everyone in saying we're all pumped to hear about your journeys, how you've adapted through COVID, and how we can learn from you. So thanks for being here. But before we get started, a huge thank you, one, for joining us. This is the first ever virtual Denver Startup Week. So if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we need to adapt, we need to work through things, and we do it together, and that's what makes it palatable. So we're here virtually. We're here to show the world what Denver is made of, and it's all because of people like you who attend and contribute and really make this community special. So at Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect and grow regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or any combination of the aforementioned items. There's something for everyone at Denver Startup Week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors. That's how we bring Denver Startup Week to life for free and accessible for everybody. So as mentioned in the quick video, give them a shout out if you can. Appreciate all of our sponsors helping us, again, bring this to life. So without further ado, we're going to jump in. I have a few slides that we're going to go through at the end. But to start, we're going to chat with these 4 awesome founders of various startups actually around the country. They'll all kind of share where they operate out of. Given this is virtual, we had the opportunity to bring in some really cool people. So we'll touch on how each founder recognized the opportunity they had to adapt their product during COVID. Again, we're focusing on how companies have kind of changed and how they have modified their outlook given the pandemic. So we hear how they recognized the opportunity, how they validated their adaptation, and how they're positioning themselves for future success moving forward. So there's a Q&A button in the Zoom tool. If you have any questions, we'll get to them at the end, but feel free to leave them there. Thank you in advance for that. At the very end, we have a few quick things. We're going to try something new for Startup Week: 2 tools and 2 books that can help you validate your product and your business in the middle of the pandemic. So we're going to pull that up. Stay till the end. It's worth it, I promise. And with that, let's get underway. So first things first, I want to introduce everybody on the panel. And then everyone's going to kind of go around and share a little bit about their business today, what stage they're in, and all that kind of stuff. So maybe I'll just start on my tiles here. Claire, I see you're up first. Why don't you jump in?
All right. Yay. Startup Week is one of my favorite weeks of the entire year. We're based in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm usually at the Columbus, Ohio Startup Week, but I'm so excited to join Denver's. So yes, my name is Claire, and I'm the founder and CEO of Flow Enterprises. So our primary brand is AuntFlow. And in the pandemic, we launched Workflow. And our primary mission as a company is to ensure everyone has access to basic necessities. So for the past 5 years, we've been manufacturing and designing free vend tampon and pad dispensers. Yes, we're a hardware company, hence all of my boxes and product and shit behind me. I was saying the other beautiful backgrounds reminds me that I should run a tech company. But yes, we manufacture these devices, and they are in hundreds of companies across the United States and Canada. We stock everything ranging from Google North America to, I saw Capital One as a sponsor. Yay, Capital One. We stock all of their bathrooms as well, to middle schools, high schools, and universities, all with tampons and pads. And then in the pandemic, we leveraged the fact that we know some things about manufacturing, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we did that. But that is who I am, and that is my company.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. We're excited you're here. Caroline, you're up next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline, and I'm the founder and CEO of Wedfully, and Wedfully has had quite the journey during the pandemic. Wedfully started about 3 years ago, and it was virtual wedding planning. And then when the pandemic hit, and also we're based in Denver, Colorado. So I feel like I'm coming full circle right now, because when we first launched Wedfully, it was a different name. And I remember sitting at Denver Startup Week and being like, that name doesn't make sense. And I was like sitting at an event and Wedfully came to mind. So I feel it's really cool, and I feel really honored to be a part of this. And like I said, coming full circle, because I gained a lot of insight and learned a lot from panels, and still learn a lot from panels. So, but it's really fun to be on the panel as well. So go Denver. I'm actually in Crested Butte, Colorado right now. So I kind of escaped city life during the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit, obviously a lot of our weddings, they were all in-person weddings. They started to postpone and cancel. And I honestly was just noodling on a way to get through. I think we all thought it was going to be kind of temporary, and thought, oh, well, I have a contact at Zoom, and Zoom is doing really well right now. So what if we launched like a collaboration with them and did a couple online weddings and got through the pandemic that way? And 4 or 5 months later, we've since done over 400 weddings, and they've all been on Zoom. And it's been really fun. And I think the coolest thing about it is that we've actually fully pivoted away from, obviously we're still doing a lot of wedding planning with the virtual weddings, but we've actually fully pivoted away from virtual weddings or virtual wedding planning. And we're now going full force, moving forward, even post-pandemic, with virtual weddings. So I'm excited to dive into this topic and hear more from everyone else, and kind of share what that journey's been like.
Awesome. Thank you, Caroline. Brian, I have you up next.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Room. Our first product was a soundproof phone booth that ships flat and assembles on site in offices, designed to give people a little bit of peace and quiet. We're actually based primarily in New York, but I was born in Inglewood, Colorado. So strong Denver and Colorado roots. Great night for the Nuggets last night. So that was awesome. But at Room, we really are on a mission to reimagine the modern workplace and to make work environments really tailored and conducive to great, for people, to inspire great work for people, right? And we're a Series A company. We signed our term sheet in January of this year, closed in March. So that's definitely a pandemic story. That's for another time, perhaps. But during the pandemic, we really made two kind of changes. One was we saw that there was a need to build quickly deployable infrastructure to facilitate rapid throughput, high volume COVID testing. So we did a 3-week design sprint and donated about 70 test booths to a couple dozen hospitals around the US and Europe, actually. So that was one thing that we did just to be relevant and to help contribute to the cause as much as possible. The other thing we've done is we've really doubled down on our innovation during this time, because the pandemic has forced people to really reevaluate what the office is supposed to accomplish, what the role is between your office and your culture, your office and the idea of employee flexibility. And we really felt that there are significant gaps in how workplaces are designed that we were well positioned to fill. So we doubled down on our innovation, our product roadmap. We actually introduced a lot of the products that you see in my background, which I can talk about. But those were the two primary responses that we've had to the pandemic.
Oh, you're
Sorry,
on
I was
mute,
muted
Ryan.
there. Thanks, Brian. Glad you're here. Jose, you're up.
Hey, everyone. I'm Jose Vietes. I'm one of the founders and directors at Boomtown Accelerators. I don't have that logo up. Right now, we're currently full force on the accelerator we're running right now called Sports Tech with Comcast, NBC Universal. But what we do, we're a startup accelerator. We help early stage entrepreneurs get the resources they need to overcome the challenges they're facing now, they're going to face in the future, and helping companies get to product market fit. So we've been operating in Boulder since 2013, done 13 cohorts there. And we were in the middle of running a cohort in March when COVID hit. So that led to some adjustment. We had a cohort both in Boulder and in Atlanta, where we run the Farm Accelerator. Yeah, so I'll get to that kind of later. But my background, been running startups for I think 15 years now. I've done 5 different startups, and yeah, moved out to Colorado 8 years ago. Started Boomtown, and yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Perfect. Glad you're here. Boulder's the best. Go Buffs, Jose. I like that. All right, so let's jump in a little bit and just maybe a quick summary. So we heard all the founders talk about Claire's company went from making hygienic products to making PPE and sanitizing products. Caroline's company went from online wedding planning to doing online weddings. Brian's company went from selling soundproof phone booths for operation offices to helping out in the pandemic and securing our first line workers, but also doubling down on innovation to help bring people back to the office. And then Jose's got a really interesting perspective, which we're looking to tap into. Your Boomtown has adapted to be virtual during the pandemic, but you also get to see tons of companies in your portfolio that have adapted as well. So maybe we can tap into that at some point if you're comfortable sharing, Jose. Okay, so maybe we'll go back in the same order for now. We won't go in the same order for everything, but Claire, so tell us a little bit more about your pivot and your change. Walk us through the ideation process. How did you determine that was an opportunity you could take on, and kind of what made you decide to take action to go with workflow?
So when I think about responding to an international pandemic, that is like the charge of entrepreneurs. Like, it is our job as entrepreneurs to see a crisis or see a problem and solve for it. And that's what makes me excited about entrepreneurship and why everybody here is at Startup Week, because startups solve real problems. And so when I started my company 5 years ago, that's when I started manufacturing medical devices. So I've been in the manufacturing world for 5 years. Tampons right here are medical devices, class 2 medical devices. And then we also manufacture FDA regulated products, which are pads. And so we only sell to businesses. We sell to businesses and schools, all of the places that were shutting down. And so, and we also manufacture in China. So we had 2 people who actually died at our factory in China. So we knew that COVID was a very, very real thing in December of 2019. So as soon as we heard that it was coming to the US and it was in the US, I knew that it was going to be bad. And so we actually started shifting our manufacturing of 100% organic cotton menstrual pads to these fancy dancy FDA approved 3-ply masks in February. And we did this because instead of thinking about the things that we didn't have, AKA customers that were paying or at their businesses, like we make money off of throughput of tampons and pads and nobody was using them because nobody was at their school and nobody was at their office. Instead of focusing on the things that we didn't have, I really just mental mapped what we had. And that was manufacturing capabilities and direct connections to hundreds of facilities managers all across the United States and Canada. And so instead of having goals of growth, my goal became don't furlough anyone. And that's really why we decided it made sense to go into this industry. It was don't furlough anyone. It was a massive risk. We've raised $2.7 million to date, and we've been profitable for the past year and a half. And so all of the money that we had in our bank account was earned money, and we wired all of it to retool our production from pads to masks. And we started with 200,000 masks a week, and then we ramped to 2 million masks a week in a matter of 4 weeks. Then we were awarded some massive state contracts, and we were able to fulfill on that. And so it was just like a really, I'm incredibly thankful that we made the risk early on, but it was a massive risk. It was literally all of the money. And I had 2 weeks from wiring that money to when payroll hit that I had to make the money back. I had 2 fucking weeks. And so when I talk about this stuff, it's not like like I did a calculated decision. There was no time for calculated decisions. It was, I have no other way to keep people paid. And so I'm going to make this massive bet to try to keep them paid. And that was like a long tangent to say that what's most exciting about this time is it really tests to see if entrepreneurs are up for solving real problems. And everybody on this panel is. So honored to be around you guys.
Hey, that's an amazing story. And we have a question later about what you maybe wish you would have done differently in the last 6 months in that journey, Claire. And I can't wait to hear that from you because of this, the speed to the change you put in place. So thank you for sharing that. Caroline, same question for you. How did you validate the adaptation and your pivot? What was the moment you knew this is the right thing for Wedfully to do and be moving forward?
Yeah, I think I can talk on the other side of Claire because we didn't need a lot of money to do what we were doing. And so I think the most important thing that I did before deciding to switching to full on online weddings was a later down the road decision. But I remember I was skiing that day. It was a weekend, and Vail Resorts shut down, which in Colorado was I feel like that was kind of the start of oh crap, we kind of have to take this really seriously. And unlike Claire, I didn't really know anything other than what was directly impacting us. I had read the news, but I had asked Claire earlier, I was how did you know back in February to do that? Because I think it hit us a little bit later, we weren't in New York, we were in Denver. And so I remember thinking okay, I just don't want to have to fully shut down because of this. And so same thing, I just was how can we just somehow survive this? And it was kind of a really impulse decision. And I remember that evening I had 2 contacts. So I used my network 100%. I emailed a friend who worked at LinkedIn, shout out to Paige, and just was hey, do you have any connections at Zoom? Sorry. And I was hey, do you have any connections at Zoom who I could work with on this press release? Because I really want to get a story out around Zoom weddings. And then I got on Facebook and I searched every single wedding group there was. So there are all these groups on Facebook. And I was saw all these people who were having conversations around I'm still doing my wedding regardless of what happens. And I found all of these people, and I DM'd probably 100 people on Facebook, being so creepy and being hey, I really, really want to test out doing a wedding on Zoom. Can we do your wedding for free? And one person responded, or not one, but whatever, 10 people responded, and one person was getting married within the time frame that I really wanted. And then, Paige was Zoom is we're just nuts right now. And so I was okay, whatever. I'm just going to I scrounged the internet and found their marketing email. And by the grace of God, I think this was just luck, pure luck. They did respond. I was hey, we really want to partner with you all and do these weddings. I think it'd be really great press and blah, blah, blah. So they're great, we're on board. I had to write the press release. So I reached out to my friends who do PR and was hey, can you help me do this press release? Wrote this press release. and sent it to Zoom, and they were like, you can't use partnership. This is not a partnership, like, but whatever, you can use collaboration. Sure, go for it. So I was like, great. The headline was like, Wedfully collaborates with Zoom for virtual weddings. And I DM'd, it's all about DMing. I DM'd my friend on Instagram who worked for New York Times and wrote like for the wedding section. We like were on the newspaper together in high school. And I was like, can you please pass this along to whoever you need to? And she was like, oh my gosh, like we actually are doing a huge article on virtual weddings right now because people are having to pivot to them. And I was like, okay, can you send this to whoever's writing it? So sure enough, she sends it to them. And I just like sent my press release out to everyone, and we did this one wedding. And like, luckily the bride walked down the aisle with a cardboard cutout of her dad. So we had like these amazing pictures, this great story to tell. And New York Times like took forever to publish, but then all these other articles started publishing. So we like really leaned on PR at that point. And it was like, we got in Brides Magazine, which got 60 or 70 people who signed up, and it was free at that point. I was like, we're going to do the 50 first weddings free. And I was like a crazy person on Zoom with this is like my infamous virtual background. And I was like, okay, here's how you do virtual weddings, and we're going to do this. And I just pulled all of their ideas. And then kind of coming back to when we decided to fully dive in, after talking to all these people and doing hundreds of weddings, I think we just were like, there's a future in this past just the pandemic. And we were seeing it, and we saw it directly from customers. Like, we just saw all these people getting married, and we just saw the possibility there and everyone's feedback. And I think, that we just, honestly, I have to say network and customers are the two things that got us to where we are. And that's, kind of the scrappy story.
Hey, it's inspirational. Really cool to hear about how you hustled to get PR and use your resources networks. That's awesome, Caroline. Brian, same thing for you. How did you identify that you could make these protected booths for frontline workers? And then maybe in a similar vein, like I think maybe you felt like you were forced into how do we make sure people go back to work because that's where they're using our product. But I'm really curious to hear kind of how your team went through the ideation process to determine what you could do to help people feel comfortable getting back in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great hearing these stories because definitely feel like there are lots of similarities and parallels. We, similar to Flow, we have a physical product company, right? So our supply chain was heavily disrupted. Our ability to develop new products was heavily disrupted because we couldn't really validate things and couldn't really visit the factory and things like that, right? And we also had a pretty big impact to sales given that everybody was working from home. So early on in the pandemic, we were just kind of keeping our eyes open and trying to understand how we could, what we should do as a business, what we should do from a product perspective, and how we could potentially even help. And a lot of people were sending links to me actually about how different countries were being successful at really high throughput, high volume COVID testing. So specifically, South Korea was using these negative pressure isolation rooms where one person would be on, the healthcare worker would be on one side and then the patient would be on the other side. And that was a way to reduce the usage of PPE for healthcare workers because we were in such a dire shortage at the time. So we looked at that and we said, okay, this is something that we could do pretty easily and pretty quickly. We specialize in building structures that are quickly deployable, flat packed, assembly on site. And we thought, okay, this is something that we could do and repurpose our engineering, product, supply chain capabilities and get it out to frontline workers. We knew that time was of the essence. We knew that, for us to be relevant at all, it had to be within a very, very short period of time. It couldn't be a months-long kind of product development life cycle. And we weren't really sure whether there would be commercial demand if this was a commercial opportunity. And so what we did was we said, okay, let's give ourselves 3 weeks from ideation to production. And let's put on the table what resources we have available and what products we have available. And it turns out that we had plexiglass doors that usually go into our phone booth in stock. And we said, okay, how can we use these to do these kind of quick assembly test booths and send them to hospitals, and how do we validate demand? So what we did was our design team did a great and amazing job. They worked, day and night for a week to understand the requirements and to repurpose these plexiglass doors for the use of COVID testing. And we knew that we didn't necessarily want to, get stuck in the process of hospital procurement. And so what we did is we launched a donation campaign, and we basically donated the first production batch of these test booths. And we found through our network about a couple dozen hospitals that wanted to receive these test booths and use them. And from there, there was literally 3 weeks from idea to first deliveries of the test booth, but we got test booths out to about a couple dozen hospitals, and we're excited to see them being used. I think we received several messages of thanks, especially from Boston Medical Center, where they were doing 150 tests with our booths per day. And then I think what we realized pretty quickly was people were very happy to receive it, but there wasn't really a commercial opportunity that was like a revenue opportunity. So we, paused that basically the first batch of donations, and we said, okay, we were happy to contribute, but this is, it's not a commercial opportunity. And so we went back to the drawing board as to what our product portfolio looks like. But so, it was almost, the test booth was an interesting case where it was almost the mirror image of flow, where we tried to validate demand, and we realized that there wasn't. And so we actually made the decision to pause with what we did.
That's a great story, Brian. I think we oftentimes started week stuff, you're hearing about success stories a lot, and you're all eminently successful, but I think going down a path where you realize, hey, this isn't the right opportunity, and sharing kind of why, that's hugely valuable for anyone listening to hear. So thank you for sharing that. Jose, same kind of thing for you. Walk us through how you adapted Boomtown to be virtual, and all those fun steps that were probably just as challenging as making Denver Startup Week virtual. But we would love to hear from your side as well.
Yeah, it was a fun journey because in our case, our staff were also our customers in a sense, right? So we have 12 startups, each with on average 2.5 people, who were in the Boulder office going through the accelerator. And so they were both, the employees that we were trying to protect while things, the rumors of coronavirus and everything were growing. And at the same time, there were our customers, which we had to serve. So we had to both balance, that the safety side with also, with making sure that they're served, because for startups, a 6-month disruption or 3-month disruption can be enough to make it or break it for a company. And of course, safety was our primary priority. And so the question was, is there a way to optimize both things? Is there a way to make sure they're still getting value, but at the same time, we're absolutely keeping them safe? And, in this case, we're about 30 entrepreneurs in a relatively tightly packed space, hanging out every single day. And from the start, it was like, okay, they're saying, that's not healthy. And we've had, do we go remote? But what would that look like from the point of view of all the different mentors that we come in? We have over 400 mentors, of which in any given cohort we'll have 150 or so coming in and meeting one-on-one with each founder and founding team. So how do we manage not only those entrepreneurs that are in the cohort, but then the mentors, the investors, our sessions. So there were a lot of moving parts. And so in the beginning, we started just leveraging kind of the knowledge we've had before of like, okay, if anyone feels unsafe, before it was anything mandatory, if anyone feels unsafe, please don't come in. And in the past, we've always had founding teams that were traveling. So because of business or whatever else. So if one of the founders was gone, we'd try to Skype them in or whatever else. And but we knew that traditional model by itself wouldn't work. So we started speaking with each team to say, okay, look, it looks like probably a month from now or something, because we started probably mid-February for this cohort. It looks like we're going to be going remotely. How can we work? So we spoke with each team and tried to identify what would their needs be to help them. Is it camera technology? Is it internet or whatever else? We had a number, about 30% of the cohort was international. So we had to figure out, we had to work with them for visa restrictions or even like if they don't leave now, will they be able to go back home? And they're going to be in, a temporary rental in Boulder, which is not cheap, while at the same time not being with family. So there were a lot of moving parts, and we had to speak with we spoke with each of our teams and identify what their needs were and how we can help them. And at the same time, we had a cohort that was 2 weeks later starting in Atlanta. So we had to do this, across both locations with 22 startups. So really quickly, we started kind of testing it, where founders would be kind of home for a day for the week, and try to do everything remotely or a few hours a day. And the biggest thing we worried about was engagement and actually getting those lessons across, because Boomtown is not just a lecture environment where we're teaching things in a one-way experience. It's very much applied and practical, and we'll talk about a topic, and then the startups work together to apply that, whether it's user experience design or customer discovery, going out to the street and talking to customers and learning about them. So we have to figure out not just how to teach effectively, but how to still have that experience and the benefit of applying that knowledge with our startups before a lot of the knowledge is already kind of been figured out now for teachers and schools. So yeah, it was challenging, and but we learned a lot. We ended up getting through that, and then towards the end, or really quickly, we knew that the other big thing we had to figure out was demo day, right? So we love our demo day. We open it up to the public. 1,000 people at Boulder Startup, Boulder Theater is probably not safe. We concluded really quickly, and we kind of saw the writing on the wall. And so we had to kind of figure that out. Not only how do we run a demo day if we did a demo day, right? So everything was up in the kind of up for grabs for experiments. It was actually a lot of fun. We ran a lot of experiments already. We run about 50 experiments every cohort. We never run the same thing twice, but now our experiments all changed really quickly. And we have to identify, we have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with demo day? How do we make sure, what is the goal of demo day? What are we trying to achieve there? And how can we recreate some of that or even enhance it without having that physical experience? And so it was a big choreography of sorts, where we had to send recording equipment to all of our companies and coach them through how to do effective camera angle, position, and lighting and everything, because we normally have professional camera people on our team and elsewhere working with the teams for recording this, and now each person had to figure that out themselves while being while speaking and giving their pitch and getting ready for demo day. So and demo day, I guess I should give some context, is where each of our companies at the other program pitches in front of investors and the community. Yeah, in the end, I think it was a lot of fun. Not only did we have a ridiculous amount of live attendance, which was on par with our typical 1,000 people per demo day or so that we get, but then we had it was through the roof number of views online of people streaming in, which was actually really exciting, because it created a lot of opportunities for our companies. I mean, it was like 70,000 plus views, like that. It was nuts. And what that led to, though, was both what our companies were working on being shared nationally and internationally, but also a lot of opportunities where government agencies and different individuals were needing different things to deal with COVID actually reached out to our companies, because we have 50% of this cohort was health tech, and they were asking them, okay, can you do what you're doing but for COVID related challenges? And so that by itself kind of leads into some of the other learnings that we had, which involved around kind of our startups pivots and kind of some of the learnings they did, where they there were a lot of different stories. We have about 150 companies that have gone through Boomtown now, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So.
Jose, you have a unique vantage point to see through this all. It's fascinating to hear, and I just put a comment in the chat that I think you and Caroline both could probably trade some more stories about training.
I was thinking that the whole time he was talking. I was like, I can relate trying to teach people how to like get married and set up cameras and look good and like understand it all.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, but for us, it's just it's an investment or check. For you, it's like your wedding day. That's a big deal.
Yes, it is only one day, which makes the stakes high.
Awesome. Okay, so I wrote way too many questions, so I'm gonna pick the best ones here, and maybe we'll try to do a little bit of rapid fire through some of these other ones. Brian, I'm gonna start with you on this one. How did you get buy-in from your customers on your change and trying to say that Room is safe to use in the workspace? And I'm going to ask a similar question to everybody else, but it could be around your investors too. I know a number of people on the panel have taken on institutional capital. I'm curious if you felt along the way that you needed to get buy-in for some of your pivots and changes and product offerings from your investors.
Yeah, so just so I understand the question is, how do we get buy-in from customers on the safety of our products?
Yeah. So like just in the spirit of mentioning, Room is focusing now on making sure people
safely return to the office.
How did you
absolutely.
You're getting buy-in?
So especially early on, there was tons of noise around, even just guidance from the CDC was all over the place, right? Wear masks, don't wear masks, but all that kind of stuff. But we spent a lot of time trying to understand what the kind of official guidance is. And there was this analogy that was being thrown around a lot, which is, post 9/11, there are all these, there was a ton of security infrastructure that had to be deployed, and there was a booming security consulting business. And what was clear with COVID was that few people knew who to consult for expertise. Everybody knew that there would be all this type of medical security infrastructure that had to be deployed, but there wasn't a whole lot of guidance as to who those experts were. Over time, that has evolved, right? So OSHA, which focuses on occupational safety, has put out a lot of good guidance. The CDC has put out more guidance as well around kind of what constitutes safe return to work. And so we spent a lot of time studying those things and talking to all the experts that we could from our network, whether it was facilities managers or medical experts. But it was really just a lot of talking and making sure that we formulated an opinion that was based on science and facts, right? And when we did that, for example, I'll give an example is like we looked at whether we should be replacing our phone booth with antimicrobial fabrics and surfaces, or whether we should be using HEPA filters and things like that. And it was looking at the facts and looking at the science, consulting with the experts that helped us navigate these different product decisions. And ultimately, we found that when people want to return to the office, the things that are top of mind are de-densification, providing physical barriers between people to help enforce social distancing, and ventilation, right? So our products are highly ventilated. They replace the air inside of each room about once per minute, which is 5 times better than a traditional conference room. Our products help with the de-densification because it provides that physical barrier and isolation that sometimes people will want to feel safe to return. And then in terms of the antimicrobial surfaces and things of that nature, what we learned from everything that we read was that they didn't necessarily prove to be helpful, or there wasn't really proven transmission via surfaces as much as people thought originally. And that, in fact, the best kind of practice and recommendation is to just have a frequent cleaning of these high touch surfaces, an abundant supply of sanitizer and things like that. So yeah, that's how we came to the conclusions that we did.
Very cool. Glad to hear you've been diligent with it. We've got our room in our office and looking forward to returning to it soon because of all the things you've done, Brian. So that's great. Claire, let me ask you a different question. Talk to us. I know you said you obviously had manufacturing experience and materials and all that stuff. But how did you kind of gain the expertise and get the clearance needed for safety and all that stuff for FDA approvals and whatever else maybe is needed for for workflow? I know you probably had that from Antflow in the past, but talk to us a little bit how you went through that and how you did it quickly. And then I'd love to ask you one more quick question too after you get through that one.
Yeah, and I'll keep it rapid fire. You cut me off, Ryan, when you want. By the way, there are 34 attendees, and I have asked questions in the chat, and nobody has responded. So if we want to get things interesting, start participating. Shout out to Caroline for responding to my messages. So anyways, in terms of regulations, one of the scariest parts about this industry is the forgery in registrations. So as you've probably seen recently, there were companies that were manufacturing bags or clothing, and now all of a sudden they're manufacturing literally medical devices. And I'm incredibly thankful that we have been manufacturing medical devices. And so we know what a K10 pre-market notification is. We know when you import products, what the labeling needs to be to ship it as hazardous material. If it's, these are some of our medical grade wipes for surface cleaning to kill COVID and SARS. So there's all of this stuff. And then in addition to that, there's the claims. And one of the scariest parts is when you see hand sanitizer or wipes, it might say sanitizing wipe, which is different than disinfectant wipe, which is different than antibacterial wipe. And so as consumers of products, the burden has now been put onto us to understand the difference, because manufacturers can just adjust the wording slightly. So I'm incredibly thankful that we have understood verbiage and claims for the past 5 years, but for people that are just getting into it, that's where it gets scary. And it's now the burden of the consumer rather than the burden of the manufacturer, which is relatively concerning. That's how we got through the rules and regulations. We basically already had all of that locked in. And then just like Carolyn, we really leaned on our network. I've been grateful that over the past 5 years, we've built a pretty extensive network with the FDA and with the CDC to understand and ensure that our products are aligned to make sure that everybody is healthy and safe.
Awesome. And Claire, what if you could do something differently in the last 6 months in regards to launching workflow, what would it be? Or maybe even for maintaining Antflow, but what would it be for you?
Man, the past 6 months was brute force expansion with very little strategy. What I loved about Brian was he thought about it and then executed, but we just were like, all right, we're doing this. And while it turned out well from a financial position, our team suffered. Morale was incredibly low because nobody knew exactly what we were selling. No one, everybody was pulling 15 to 16-hour days. Our sales team was around the clock answering phone calls, adjusting to the situation. Shipments were getting held in customs. And so we had to share with customers and adjust, and salespeople never wanted to have the burden of sharing poor news. So I often had to get on those phone calls. And so if there's one thing that I wish I would have done better was have more thoughtful communication with my team. It's really easy for me and for us as founders to want to hermit away and solve the problems. But I wish I would have communicated more openly with the team about what was going on rather than just absolute chaos for almost 6 months.
Yeah. Makes sense. Appreciate your transparency there, Claire. That's really helpful to hear. Caroline, I'm going to start with that question for you. So you've had quite the journey, kind of pivoting your entire business. What about the last 6 months do you wish you would have done differently? And kind of in the spirit of how can we help people listening in today, maybe cut some corners in that regard?
My biggest thing that I wish I would have done differently was like lean into this more early on, but I feel like we didn't really know what this was going to look like. I wish though I would have hired more people early on and just ran with it, because like Claire, we had a lot of we're still pretty exhausted. And I think a lot of my team's on here right now. So thanks for still hustling. But I think having like a little bit more faith, which 2020 hindsight, a little bit more faith in like what we could do with where we were going would have been great, because, you know, we are bootstrapped. So I've only raised like a very small friends and family round. So I like always get nervous with the financials, because everything that's coming in has to support paychecks and everything we do. So I think I wish I would have like leaned in a little bit more early on, but honestly, overall, like I'm ecstatic with where we've gone. And I think something that I did really great early on that I'm really happy about was also on the flip side, like hired amazing people and built such a great team. So I don't know. I feel like the biggest thing is just, you know, I think we ran the risk of burning out just because we were working around the clock. And so, you know, I think I echo Claire too in saying that, like, I wish I would have buckled down earlier and put more strategy around things and structure in place. But overall, like, I think given how crazy the times were, I think I hats off to everyone who's just done something to get by, and it doesn't need to be clean and look nice. Just trying something during this time, I think, is really great. So yeah, my biggest thing would have just been to hire more people earlier.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Hindsight's beautiful, isn't it? Like, yeah, that's an easy decision. I don't know why I didn't do that. Jose, let's see. For you, I'm curious if you felt you could have done something different in your kind of move to being online. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of if you think this hybrid model is really the future, and how you plan to interact with your portfolio companies moving ahead.
Absolutely. I think we have an incredible team. They're just awesome, and specifically my co-founder is very paranoid about every potential. Paranoid is probably not the right word, but very can see around corners, and when there's a potential warning, like he dives in and says, okay, what's going to happen in the worst case scenario? And I'm not saying we did it all perfectly, but we really dove into contingency planning from the start of kind of news coming out. And we have a team that's just really good at customer discovery and just serving our customers, the entrepreneurs. And so they did a really good job during this entire process. So what I would have done differently, though, is actually probably more than 6 months, which is we learned that through this process, this was great. This was amazing. Like the program was really solid. Even though it was remote, we were really worried that the quality would go down. And instead, what we had was significant uptick of mentor participation, because now we had access to all of our mentors that often couldn't fly in for sessions, or, you know, were in the coast or whatever else. Like the standard became everyone's remote. So all our entire pool of, you know, the entire mentor family was now a lot more engaged. And that was something I would have not expected. And so what I wish I would have done differently is tried more hybrid or remote learning earlier on in our cycle, because we've had a lot of really great founding teams that we weren't able to accept to our program because our requirement was at least 2 people coming here full time in person. And I think that is going to look differently going forward. I think we'll still prefer that. But we're going to be a lot more flexible, even if it's, you know, coming in for certain weeks or whatever else, but a lot more for the relationship building. But going forward, I think, and something I would have liked to, you know, we would have known otherwise, but because we really wanted to focus on doing one thing really well, which is our accelerator and our program and helping entrepreneurs. And we always felt it would be a distraction to have remote or hybrid. But going forward now, we've learned it's not only good, but it's actually better in some ways. and there was a little bit of some of the only parts that I say were missing. Sometimes the relationship building is not as good because you're hanging out over Zoom. But in this case, thankfully, everyone got to know each other for a few weeks before they went into the online version, which allowed that rapport to kind of continue and then build on top of that. So then like happy hours or whatever didn't feel artificial. It felt like, oh, we were doing this already. Now we're just kind of pretending, or like we're together. But going forward, I think the hybrid model has a lot of potential. There's a lot of questions out there whether accelerators will be relevant, whether they'll be, whether remote accelerator programs are going to be good or not. I think it depends. It depends on who's running that accelerator, who's what they're actually doing to adapt. We've done a lot of things that worked well. We've seen some programs that hasn't worked well. If they just continue doing what they're doing, but now on Zoom, it isn't, something's missing there. So. Going forward, I'm excited to be able to serve more entrepreneurs because now we have, access to people around the world who maybe had families or whatever else that couldn't come in person, but now can, and potentially have maybe bigger cohorts too, because, it's a little, our program team will probably kill me for saying that because it's a lot of work on them, but, potentially have bigger cohorts. And also we're excited because now we have a whole bunch of like content and really high quality, content and recorded material that we can both share with our alumni and with the community and such, which we're starting to think about. So.
That's great. Yeah, it's interesting to see the kind of push. I know there's been a lot of other panels, and there are some throughout the rest of the week for Denver Startup Week, focusing on what the future means and kind of hybrid workforce and embracing work from anywhere kind of attitude. So that certainly applies to accelerators. We got a couple of questions that came through just Q&A. So Brian, Claire, real quick, talk to us a little bit about how you've handled supply chain disruption for your products, or maybe not disruption necessarily, but maybe how you've given yourself redundancy. Just talk to us a little bit about that, and then we'll quickly take through the other ones too.
Yeah. So we, it's all about trying to find a dual sourcing options, right? So we had some component suppliers in China, and we realized in February, kind of January, February, that we would be delayed on receiving some of those things. So the team, worked really hard to find that backup option and found alternative suppliers domestically. So it's about very much like what Jose was saying, just about having contingency plans and backup options.
So our supply chain, I'm incredibly grateful. We've owned most of it. Where we faced difficulties was importing. So I'm sure if anybody has listened to anything in the news, the trade war is incredibly real. But outside of just the tariffs and what is getting purchased and imported and not, there's just more scrutiny at the border. And so what that means from a time frame and logistics standpoint, it meant that instead of taking 1 to 3 days to clear customs, it was taking 5 to 8 days. So when we talk about access to products, medical grade products coming in from China, what is remarkable is a lot of it was on the US side. This all resulted in me now having Pence's phone number because it was so fucking ridiculous. Because I'm going on a tangent now, but what would happen is you'd get all of the stuff out of China, ready to go, perfectly made, and then sitting in the US waiting to get approved. And the problem was people weren't understanding how to approve because every single day the White House was saying something different. And I hate to stick it to our country, but being in the middle of this and adjusting and supporting our customers, a lot of it had to do with importing on the US side. So that was where we got stuck on a supply chain standpoint. It was more on the importing rather than the raw materials.
Always a challenge. Everything's a challenge during COVID. Caroline, real quick, have you considered other platforms other than Zoom, and why are you sticking with Zoom?
So as many of you know, Zoom bombing is a thing. So we went through a difficult phase where we got Zoom bombed. And during that time, we had built this relationship with Zoom, and a lot of, I think, my initial marketing strategy was like, oh, if we can tag, ride the coattails of Zoom, like they're getting so much press, we can kind of fall into that as well. And so that was the number one reason why we chose Zoom to begin with. And then as we started having more and more issues, we did start to look at other platforms. But, and a lot of people have been like, can you just like stream our wedding? But our like, true North Star is the fact that we create engaging and interactive weddings. Like, we don't just want it to be you tuning in and watching someone's wedding, and you could have watched a recording and it would be the same thing. Like, we want you to feel, even the playing field between virtual guests and in-person guests. The pandemic made this decision for a lot of people, so it wasn't really their choice whether or not they got to be in person. And so making sure that that was super, they felt seen and heard. And a lot of other platforms just didn't offer the two-way like connection. We don't even do webinar because we want all the guests, we want like the gallery view recording, we want all the guests to have their videos on, and we want them to be involved in the wedding. And so I have looked at a couple other ones, and I don't remember the names of all of them, but we haven't made the leap yet. And I don't know what that will look like. I wish I could create my own video platform, but then I would be like trying to compete with other big companies, and I'm staying in my lane. But, I think it's like a fun little challenge for us, is sometimes Zoom does these updates that really throw us for a loop, and we just have to kind of work with that. So I think as we grow, we'll find a way to make something work, whether that's, it's working really well right now. But yes, Ryan, we did observe other platforms. We did do a lot of research on that. And what it came down to was the interactivity that we wanted just couldn't be found anywhere else the way you can do it on Zoom.
Awesome. Jose, we have a question for you just on if you've seen any really cool processes that any of your portfolio companies have used or techniques. We only have a minute or two. I don't know if anything comes to mind for you quickly, but like anything jump out to you for like validation of, in the middle of this, have you seen your companies do anything that might be helpful to people tuning in today?
I think something might come up specifically, but one thing I've seen is the companies that have thrived the most are those that have bought into a lot of what we kind of focus on during the program, which is instead of being enamored with your solution and just trying to grow that, like we teach our teams to be expert investigators and to know their customers intimately. And the companies that have done the best during this time have been kind of like you're hearing with this panel, the companies that have done similar things where they've talked to their customers and they've understood what their needs are and how they're changing, regardless of what they're communicating externally or what assumptions you might have, like really learning and seeing their behaviors and seeing where their needs are going and currently are, and adjusting to that. So the teams that didn't just continue to do what they were doing, but maybe just switch to remote, but rather actually customize, like Caroline was saying about not just, like really understanding what their needs are for weddings. And so learning from the customers, those are the teams that have done the best because now there's the sudden uptick of everyone's kind of scrambling to figure out how to adjust into, with COVID coming, but then people start norming into what day-to-day life looking, and if it looks like, and if you didn't really solve their problem, you just provided kind of like a temporary, Band-Aid, then they're going to move on from you and go towards other customers that actually did that research and really do solve their problem. So that's what I'd say. I don't have a specific story right now. So.
No, that's super helpful. I think it just highlights the need to be flexible and continue to iterate. So that's awesome. Team, we're at the end of our session here. As promised, though, we have some quick tips for people. If you can see the screen here, how do you test your product right now? Here's two tools you can use today. You can go to venturely.io. You can enter your business plan. They help you test. They help you come up with experiments. They help you validate your idea. Check it out. And another quick thing, you can do assumption mapping to really figure out what assumptions about your product and business are the most critical for your success, and how do you test them. Check out venturely.io for both of those. And then separately here, oh boy, 2 books. Check out Testing with Humans. It's a great way to help you learn why you need to run experiments for your product, when to test the business versus the product, what makes a good experiment, how to turn experiments into decisions and actions, how can we bring experiments into our business culture. 7 Powers is a book for you to understand your strategy and how to create a moat around power of your product, how to protect your product from other competitive forces, all that kind of stuff. Actionable steps. We had an awesome panel. Thank you so much to Claire, Caroline, Brian, Jose. Y'all are awesome to listen to, super helpful. Check out more stuff for Denver Startup Week for the rest of the week. We have a bunch more product sessions today, tomorrow, and Friday. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan.